The galaxy was never quiet. In every corner of space, there were wars, broken treaties, and endless battles. But even in this violent universe, one tribe stood above all in cruelty and terror. They were called the Zirath. The Zirath were not just warriors. They were monsters in the eyes of every other race. 10 feet tall, armored skin, and voices that roared like thunder. When the Zirath arrived, whole cities burned. When their ships entered orbit, entire planets surrendered without a fight. No empire wanted to face them. No army dared to challenge them. To resist the Zirath was to invite death. Across the stars, a single truth was whispered. Fear the Zirath. They cannot be defeated. Generations passed and their legend grew darker. The Zirath did not build alliances. They did not sign peace. They only conquered, killed, and left ruins behind, but then everything changed. It began with a single human ship drifting into Zirath territory. It was not a war fleet. It was not a grand armada. It was just one small vessel, old and damaged, moving slowly through the endless void. The Zirath noticed it at once. Their scanners picked it up like a predator spotting prey. For them, this was a joke. Is it lost? Some warriors asked. Or is it here to beg for mercy? Others laughed. The Zirath did not expect resistance. To them, a human was weak, fragile, soft. They thought this would be nothing more than a hunt, so they surrounded the little ship. Giant war cruisers blocked every escape, their cannons charged with burning plasma. Their warriors sharpened their blades, already imagining the blood. Inside the ship, however, there was no fear. There was only a man, a human named Elias Kane. He stood tall, watching the stars disappear as the Zirath warships closed in. His face showed no panic, no shaking hands, no desperate cries for help. Instead, his eyes burned with something else, determination. The Zirath boarded his ship. They stormed in like wild beasts, weapons raised, ready to tear him apart. But Elias did not fight back. He did not run. He stood in the center of the ship and waited for them. The warriors surrounded him, their shadows covering his human form. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward and growled, "Why are you here, human? Do you want a quick death?" Elias did not flinch. His voice was calm, but it cut through the silence like steel. "I did not come to die," he said. "I came to rule." For a moment there was silence. Then laughter exploded among the warriors. A human claiming he wanted to rule the Zirath? Impossible. Madness. They grabbed him in chains, dragging him out of the ruined ship. The tribe had a tradition. When they found something strange or foolish, they did not kill it at once. They took it back so their people could enjoy the entertainment. And so Elias Kane, alone, unarmed and chained, was taken to the heart of the Zirath stronghold. The journey through their homeworld was like traveling into a nightmare. Black skies filled with burning fires, cities made of sharp, jagged stone, warriors training with weapons the size of trees. The air was heavy with the smell of iron and smoke. Everywhere Elias saw death carved into the land. The Zirath shouted and mocked as they dragged him through the streets. "Look at this small creature," they yelled. "This fragile man thinks he is a conqueror." The crowd laughed. Children threw stones at him. Soldiers spat on him. Yet Elias never lowered his head. His eyes never left the horizon. He walked like a man who belonged there, even though the world around him wanted him dead. Finally, they brought him to the Great Hall, where the leader of the Zirath tribe waited. High Warlord Zyrak sat on a throne made of skulls. His body was massive, his armor scarred from countless wars. His eyes glowed like fire. He was the terror of the galaxy, the nightmare of nations. When Elias was thrown before him, the hall fell silent. Everyone expected a quick execution. One gesture from Zyrak and the human would be crushed. The warlord leaned forward, studying this strange creature. His voice was low, dangerous. "Human, why do you come here into the jaws of death?" Elias lifted his head. His voice was steady, fearless. "I told your warriors already. I am not here to die. I am here to rule." The hall shook with laughter. Warriors slammed their fists on the ground. "Kill him! Kill the foolish human!" they cried, but Zyrak did not laugh. He stared at Elias with burning eyes. Something about this man was different. No fear, no begging. Only a challenge. And so the warlord raised his hand, silencing the hall. "No, he will not die today." The crowd gasped. Zyrak continued, his voice echoing across the chamber. "If this human thinks he can rule, then let him prove it. "He will face the trial by blood," the warriors roared. The trial by blood was a death sentence. No outsider had ever survived it. The human would be torn apart and the crowd would enjoy the show. But Elias Cain only smiled. And in that moment, a spark of legend was born. Chains rattled as Elias Cain was dragged deeper into the fortress of the Zerath. The crowd's laughter echoed behind him, but inside he felt nothing but silence. His heart was steady, his breath calm. He had expected this moment for years. The warriors pushed him into a dark chamber, the air thick with smoke and dust. Torches burned along the stone walls, casting long shadows that looked alive. The Zerath guards stood like statues, their massive spears glowing faintly with alien energy. For the first time, Elias was alone with his thoughts. Most men, standing where he stood, would have broken already. The Zerath were not just a tribe, they were a nightmare carved into reality. Countless civilizations had fallen before them, their fleets shattered, their leaders slaughtered. Entire worlds had chosen slavery rather than resist, but Elias Cain was not most men. He was a soldier, yes. He had fought in the human wars, watched comrades fall in battle, and learned what it meant to survive when all hope was gone. Yet he carried something more dangerous than strength or skill. He carried an idea, the idea that even monsters could bleed. The guards returned, shoving him forward through iron doors. He entered the grand arena, a place every Zerath child grew up hearing about. A circle of jagged black stone surrounded by a roaring crowd. Above them all, on his throne of skulls, sat High Warlord Zerak. The moment Elias stepped inside, the crowd erupted with savage cheers. They did not see him as a man. They saw him as food for the trial. At the center of the arena stood his opponent, a Zerath warrior unlike the others, taller, broader, his armor covered in scars from past battles. His weapon, a massive blade that hummed with energy, was already soaked in dried blood. This was Korath the Breaker, champion of the Zerath. He had killed hundreds in this very arena. To fight him was not just a test, it was a death sentence. The crowd shouted his name. "Korath! Korath! Korath!" But Elias did not look afraid. He stepped into the circle, his chains removed, his eyes fixed on the giant before him. Korath tilted his head, confused by the human's calmness. "Do you not tremble, little man?" he growled, his voice echoing like thunder. "Do you not see death standing before you?" Elias answered with a steady voice. "I see a warrior who bleeds like any other, and I will make you bleed." The crowd gasped, then burst into wild laughter. A human speaking to Korath in such a way? Madness. But Zerak leaned forward in his throne, his interest growing. The fight began. Korath charged first, swinging his enormous blade with terrifying speed. The air cracked as the weapon cut down, aiming to split the human in two. But Elias rolled aside, the blade slamming into stone. Sparks flew. Elias moved quickly, his smaller size giving him speed. He had no weapon, only his fists, his mind, and the instincts of survival. Each time Korath attacked, Elias dodged, forcing the giant to waste his strength. The crowd roared with every clash. They wanted blood, but instead they saw something strange. The human was not dying. He was thinking. Korath grew angry. His swings became wild, his steps heavier. Elias waited for the moment he had studied since the beginning. When Korath raised his blade high above his head, Elias rushed forward, slamming his shoulder into the warrior's knee. The giant stumbled. The crowd gasped. Before Korath could recover, Elias climbed his armored body like a predator, grabbed a sharp piece of broken stone from the arena floor, and drove it into the soft flesh of the giant's neck. Blood sprayed. Korath roared in pain, falling to one knee. The crowd's laughter turned to shocked silence. Elias landed back on the ground, standing firm. His chest heaved with breath, but his eyes burned with fire. He had done the impossible. He had wounded a Zerath champion. Korath staggered, clutching his bleeding neck. He tried to rise again, but his strength failed. The mighty warrior collapsed onto the stone floor, defeated. The arena went quiet. For the first time in history, a human had stood against a Zerath warrior, and won. High Warlord Zerak rose from his throne. His voice thundered across the arena. Enough. Every warrior in the crowd bowed their heads at once. Zerak's burning eyes locked on Elias. The human stood tall, covered in sweat and blood, but unbroken. "This is no ordinary man," Zerak said. His voice was heavy with both anger and curiosity. "This one has the spirit of a conqueror." The warriors growled uneasily. The Zerath did not know whether to respect this human or tear him apart on the spot. But Elias spoke again, his voice clear enough for the entire arena to hear. "I told you before. I did not come to die. I came to rule." The silence that followed was not filled with laughter. It was filled with something new, something dangerous, respect. And deep within the shadows of the crowd, a pair of fierce eyes watched him closely, eyes belonging to Kayla, daughter of Zarak. The arena floor was still wet with Korath's blood. The crowd of Zerath warriors had fallen silent, their roars of laughter replaced by whispers of disbelief. No one had expected this. A human, small, fragile, outmatched in every way, had defeated their champion. Elias Kane stood in the middle of the circle, chest rising and falling, sweat dripping from his face. His hands were cut, his body bruised, but his eyes burned brighter than the torches above. He had not only survived, he had conquered. High Warlord Zarak rose from his throne of skulls. His massive frame cast a shadow over the entire arena. When he raised one hand, the crowd immediately went quiet. This human, Zarak's voice thundered like the strike of a war drum, is not weak. He has spilled the blood of our champion. But words are easy, victories are accidents. If he claims he came to rule, then he must prove it not once, but many times. The crowd roared in agreement. Zarak continued. He will face the trial by blood. He will fight again and again, until either he falls or we bow to what the stars have chosen. The words hit the arena like lightning. The trial by blood was not one duel. It was a gauntlet of death. Only the greatest Zerath warriors had survived it, and even they were left scarred forever. For an outsider, for a human, survival was impossible. But Elias did not flinch. He looked straight at the warlord and nodded. "I accept." The first warrior entered. This one carried twin blades, moving faster than Korath's brute strength. The Zerath warrior circled Elias like a predator, blades flashing in the torchlight. The crowd leaned forward, eager for blood. When the warrior lunged, Elias ducked, sliding across the dusty floor. He grabbed a chain left from his own broken shackles and whipped it around the alien's legs. The warrior crashed down, his blades clattering to the ground. Before the giant could rise, Elias struck with precision, driving his elbow into the weak point between the alien's armor plates. The warrior howled, then fell silent. Another one defeated. The second warrior stepped forward. This one carried no weapons, only his massive fists. He charged like a boulder rolling down a mountain. The impact shook the ground as Elias narrowly dodged aside. Elias had no chance in a contest of strength. So he did not fight strength with strength, he fought it with speed. Every time the warrior swung, Elias darted away, letting the alien's own momentum work against him. Finally, the warrior stumbled forward, too slow to stop. Elias seized the moment, jumping onto his back and slamming his head into the arena wall with brutal force. The crowd gasped as the warrior collapsed unconscious. 2 more had fallen, but the trial was far from over. The third challenger was different. She was a female Zerath, her armor marked with the symbols of countless victories. She carried a spear, its tip glowing with deadly energy. Her movements were precise, sharp, and fast. The fight was unlike the others. She did not waste time with brute strength. Every strike was calculated, every step designed to kill. Elias was pushed to the edge, blood running down his arm from a shallow cut. The crowd shouted with each clash of spear and stone. For the first time, it looked as though Elias might fall, but then he noticed something. The warrior favored her right side, her movement slower when turning left. A weakness, Elias baited her into lunging. At the last second, he spun left, dodging the strike. With all his strength, he shoved the broken shaft of a discarded spear into her exposed side. She staggered, eyes wide in disbelief, before crashing to the ground. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were no longer mocking. They were watching with respect and fear. Elias stood breathing hard, surrounded by the bodies of those he had defeated. His chest heaved, his knuckles were bloody, but he remained standing. High Warlord Zarak watched in silence. His glowing eyes studied the human carefully. For the first time in many years, the warlord felt something strange. Not anger, not pride, something heavier. Curiosity, the warriors whispered among themselves. How can this be? How can a human fight like this? Elias lifted his head and shouted so that all could hear. You see weakness when you look at me. But I tell you this, strength is not only in the body. It is here. He struck his fist against his chest. It is in the will to never kneel. The words echoed through the arena. Even those who despised him felt a shiver of respect. Zirak finally spoke, his voice calm but dangerous. You are not yet one of us. You have survived today, but the trial of blood is not finished. More will come. More will test you, until the day you can no longer stand. Elias met his burning eyes. Then I will stand forever. The crowd erupted, half in rage, half in awe. And deep in the shadows, Kayla, daughter of Zirak, watched the human with something more than curiosity. She watched him with interest, because for the first time in her life she saw someone who did not fear her people. The arena was silent after Elias Kane's last victory. The bodies of fallen warriors lay scattered across the black stone floor. The human stood among them, wounded, tired, but unbroken. The crowd of Zerath warriors who once laughed and mocked, now stared with uneasy eyes. For the first time in living memory, they were not laughing at an outsider. They were watching him. High Warlord Zirak leaned back on his throne, his glowing eyes fixed on the human. He had seen countless battles, countless challengers, but none like this. Every other outsider had died screaming, but this human stood tall, his spirit stronger than his body. Zirak raised his hand and the crowd fell into silence. His deep voice rolled through the hall like thunder. This man has spilled much blood. He has faced the trial and still breathes. He is not like the weak races we crush. He is something different. The warriors growled, torn between anger and respect. Many wanted to see Elias crushed, yet a strange feeling held them back. Fear and admiration. Elias was not given freedom. He was still a prisoner, but a prisoner treated differently. Instead of chains, he was watched by guards. Instead of being mocked, he was studied. Days turned into weeks. And every day the Zerath tested him. They threw him into combat pits against beasts with razor claws and armored hides. He survived. They forced him into duels with young warriors, hungry to prove themselves. He defeated them. They tried to break his spirit with endless trials of pain and exhaustion. But Elias endured. The tribe expected him to die at any moment. Instead, he adapted. He learned their movements, their strengths, and most importantly, their weaknesses. Soon whispers spread among the tribe. The human cannot be killed. Perhaps he is chosen by the stars. Perhaps he was sent by fate. What had started as laughter had turned into something dangerous. Respect Zirak himself began to watch more closely. Some nights he sat with his war council and spoke of Elias. He is not strong like us, Zirak admitted, but he uses his mind like a weapon. He turns weakness into power. That is rare even among our own, but not all agreed. Some generals demanded Elias be killed before he could grow more dangerous. Others feared his victories were breaking the pride of their warriors. Zirak silenced them with a single command. No, let him fight. Let him prove what he is. If he truly is nothing but a man, he will fall. If he is more, then we will see what the gods intend. Meanwhile, Elias used every moment to his advantage. He observed the tribe. He studied how they trained, how they fought, how they ruled. He saw their flaws, how they relied too much on brute force, how they underestimated smaller foes, how they wasted lives in endless battles without strategy. And slowly, he began to speak to them. After each fight, when the young warriors spat at him, Elias only said, "You fight with strength, but not with mind. One day your strength will fail, but the mind never does." At first they ignored his words, but some of the younger ones began to listen. Some even began to ask questions. "Human," they said. "How did you defeat Korath? How did you move so fast?" Elias smiled and answered simply, "Because I thought before I fought." The turning point came during a raid. A rival alien clan launched a surprise attack on the Zerath stronghold. Their ships rained fire from the skies, their warriors stormed the gates. The Zerath rushed into battle, but chaos spread quickly. Elias, still under guard, saw the confusion. He shouted at the warriors near him, "Don't rush blindly. Split into groups. Cut off their front line and strike from the sides." The guards ignored him at first, but as the enemy pushed deeper, desperation grew. Finally, one young warrior obeyed his command. Then another. Soon a whole squad followed his plan. The tide shifted. The Zerath cut through their enemies with brutal precision. For the first time, they fought not like beasts, but like soldiers. When the battle ended, victory belonged to the Zerath. But the whispers in the camp carried a new name, Elias Kane. The human had not only survived, he had saved them. That night in the Great Hall, Zirak addressed his people. His voice was steady, but his words carried weight. This human does not fight like us, yet he teaches us. He shows us ways we never saw. Maybe the gods mock us, or maybe they send us a gift. The crowd murmured, uneasy but thoughtful. Some nodded. Others still growled. But no one dared to laugh anymore. Elias stood among them, his body scarred, his eyes burning. He was no longer a joke, no longer prey. He was something more. And from the shadows, Kayla, daughter of Zirak, continued to watch. This time not with suspicion, but with a spark of interest that even she could not explain. The days after the raid changed everything. Elias Kane, once a chained outsider, was no longer treated as a mere prisoner. The Zerath had seen him fight, had heard his commands, and had tasted victory through his strategies. Their respect for him grew, but so did their fear. Around the campfires, warriors whispered his name. Some called him a trickster who used strange human cunning. Others said he was chosen by fate. But one thing was certain. No one saw him as weak anymore. High Warlord Zirak noticed the change. His people were restless. Some demanded Elias be executed before he corrupted the tribe. Others wanted to follow him. Zirak himself remained silent, watching carefully. Finally, the warlord summoned Elias to the Great Hall. The human entered with steady steps, his body still scarred from countless battles. Zirak studied him with eyes like fire. "You are dangerous," Zirak said, "not because of your strength, but because of your mind. You make my warriors listen to you. You make them question me. Why should I not crush you here and end this?" Elias met his gaze without fear. "Because without me, your tribe will continue to fight like beasts. Strong, yes. Fearsome, yes. But wasteful. Every battle costs you lives. Every victory leaves you weaker. You conquer, but you bleed. I can stop that." The hall went silent. Never before had an outsider spoken to Zirak with such boldness. "And what do you want in return?" the warlord growled. Elias answered with a single word. "Alliance." The word shook the hall. Warriors growled in fury. Some leapt to their feet, shouting, "Blasphemy! No outsider rules with us." Others laughed bitterly, calling it arrogance. But Elias did not flinch. He continued, his voice sharp and steady. "You are feared across the stars, but fear alone cannot last. Already empires plan to unite against you. They will strike together, and when they do, your brute strength will not be enough. But with me, my mind, my knowledge, my strategies, you will not just survive. You will rule them." The hall exploded with shouts. Some demanded his death. Others muttered with uncertainty. And through the noise, Zirak raised his hand, silencing the chamber. He looked down at the human. "You offer much, but the Zerath do not trust words. If you wish to lead even a fragment of my people, you will prove yourself. Not with talk, with victory." The trial began the next day. Elias was given command of a small warband, 20 young warriors, untested in great battles. They were considered expendable, the lowest of the tribe. Their task? Raid a heavily defended outpost of a rival alien clan. The warriors expected failure. To them it was a cruel joke. To Elias it was the beginning. He studied the maps, the defenses, the enemy numbers. Instead of charging blindly as the Zerath always did, he devised a plan. He taught the warriors to move silently through the night, to strike from shadows instead of roaring into open fields. At first, the young warriors resisted. "We are Zerath," they snarled. "We fight with rage, not with cowardice," Elias answered calmly. "Then die with rage, or live with strategy." They hesitated, but in the end, they followed. The raid was like nothing the Zerath had ever seen. Elias led them through hidden paths, striking the enemy from behind. He set traps, lured patrols into ambushes, and cut supply lines before the enemy even realized what was happening. By dawn, the rival clan's outpost lay in ruins. The young Zerath warriors stood victorious, their blades dripping with blood, their losses minimal. For the first time they had tasted war not only as savages but as soldiers. When they returned, the camp erupted with shock. The weak warband had returned stronger, carrying trophies of victory, and at their center walked Elias Kane unbroken, his eyes blazing with quiet triumph. The whispers grew louder. He is not just surviving, he is leading. But not everyone welcomed his rise. In the shadows of the great hall, older generals muttered, "He makes them fight like cowards. He poisons the young with strange ways. If we let him rise, he will take the tribe from within." And yet, they could not deny the results. Even Zirak himself began to wonder. He had always ruled with strength, but strength alone had limits. Elias showed him something new: victory with fewer losses. Battles won with cunning instead of endless blood. One evening, Zirak spoke to his daughter, Kayla. She had watched Elias closely, always in silence. "What do you see in him?" Zirak asked. Kayla's voice was steady, but her eyes glowed with something unspoken. "I see a man who does not kneel even when surrounded by giants. Perhaps that is why the stars keep him alive." From that day forward, the Zerath were divided. Half despised the human, calling him a threat. Half admired him, whispering that he might be the one to lead them into a greater future. Elias Cain had planted a seed. Not of fear, but of change. And once a seed is planted, no force in the galaxy can stop it from growing. The Zerath tribe had seen many strange things since the human arrived. They had seen him survive impossible battles, outsmart enemies, and even lead their warriors to victory. But what they had not yet seen was the day he faced Kayla. Kayla was no ordinary warrior. She was the daughter of High Warlord Zirak, raised among blood and fire. Stronger than most males, feared even among her own kind, she had never once been defeated. To the tribe, she was both a symbol of beauty and terror. Her armor was marked with the trophies of 100 victories. Her spear was said to have pierced the hearts of beasts that could devour entire armies. To challenge her was to invite certain death, and now the human had to fight her. The challenge was not his choice. It was Kayla's. She had watched him for weeks, studying him in silence. She had seen how he survived every trial, how he led with cunning instead of brute force, and how whispers of respect began to grow around his name. To her, this was dangerous. If the human truly wanted to rise among her people, he had to face her. Because if he could not conquer her, then he would never conquer the Zerath. The challenge was issued before the Great Hall, and the entire tribe gathered to witness. The arena roared with anticipation. Torches burned brighter, casting firelight across the black stone. Warriors slammed their fists against the ground, chanting Kayla's name. Elias stood in the center, breathing steady. He knew this fight was different. This was not just another trial. This was a battle that could decide his fate among the Zerath. Then Kayla entered. She strode into the arena like a storm, her spear in hand, her eyes sharp as blades. She did not laugh. She did not mock. She looked at Elias with the seriousness of a predator ready to kill. "You have fought many," Kayla said, her voice low and strong. "But now you face me. If you survive, you may walk among us. If you fall, your story ends here." Elias did not bow. He met her gaze with the same calm he had shown since the day he arrived. "Then let history decide which of us it remembers." The fight began. Kayla moved like lightning, her spear thrusting forward with deadly precision. Elias dodged, but each strike came faster than the last, forcing him back. She was faster, stronger, and far more skilled than any warrior he had faced before. The crowd roared with each clash, certain that the human would finally fall. But Elias had learned. He had studied every warrior, every movement, every weakness, and he knew something about Kayla. Her pride made her predictable. She pressed forward with unstoppable aggression, never considering retreat. He let her drive him back, let her believe she was forcing him into a corner. But in truth, he was waiting. When her spear thrust forward again, Elias twisted sideways, grabbing the shaft with both hands. With a sudden jerk, he pulled her forward, using her own momentum against her. Kayla stumbled, surprised for the first time. Elias moved quickly, kicking her leg out from under her. She fell to one knee, her spear clattering across the stone. The crowd gasped. In a single moment, Elias stood above her. He could have finished her. He could have struck the final blow, but he did not. Instead, he stepped back and offered his hand. Kayla froze, her eyes locked on his. No one had ever shown her mercy. No one had ever dared to fight her, and then refused to kill her. Slowly, she took his hand and rose to her feet. The crowd was silent. Elias spoke clearly, so all could hear. "I did not come to destroy the Zerath. I came to lead them. And I will not lead by killing their best. I will lead by standing beside them. For a moment silence hung heavy in the arena. Then something happened that no one expected. Kayla raised her voice. If he can conquer me, then he can conquer all. If he has defeated me, then he has the right to stand among us. The warriors erupted in shock. Some shouted in anger, others in awe, but none could deny her words. For Kayla, the undefeated, had chosen to stand with him. That night, the tribe was divided more than ever. Some cursed Elias, calling him a deceiver. Others whispered that the stars had chosen him for greatness. But what mattered most was Kayla. She no longer looked at him as a prisoner. She no longer saw him as an outsider. She saw him as something rare, a warrior not bound by brute strength but by vision, courage, and unshakable will. In time, respect became something deeper. Not only had Elias conquered her in combat, he had conquered her heart. And with their bond, human and Zerath blood began to weave together into something the galaxy had never seen before. The Zerath tribe was never the same after that night. For centuries they had lived by a single truth. Strength was all that mattered. They conquered through brute force, through fear, through endless bloodshed. But now something different pulsed through their veins, something that carried the name Elias Cain, the man who had come alone. The man who had survived their trials. The man who had conquered Kayla, the undefeated daughter of Zerath. No one laughed at him anymore. No one called him weak. Instead, they spoke his name with caution, or with respect. At first, the Zerath were divided. Some saw Elias as a threat, a foreigner who would poison their traditions. Others saw him as the future, the leader who could bring them more than endless raids and wasted victories. But the truth became clear in battle. Soon after Elias and Kayla's union, a coalition of alien empires gathered their fleets. They had heard whispers of the human who walked among the Zerath, and they feared what it meant. Together, they launched an invasion meant to end the Zerath once and for all. The enemy fleets darkened the stars. Their armies poured into Zerath territory like a flood. It should have been the end, but it was not. Elias stood before the war council, his voice calm but sharp. You cannot fight them the old way, he said. If you charge blindly, you will die. If you split your forces, you will be crushed. But if you fight with order, with strategy, with discipline, you will not only survive, you will destroy them. The generals growled in protest. We are warriors, not cowards who hide behind tricks. But Kayla rose, her voice cutting through the hall. He conquered me. He earned the right to lead. If you doubt his strength, then you doubt mine as well. Silence fell. No one dared to challenge her, and so, for the first time in their long, brutal history, the Zerath followed a plan that was not born of rage, but of reason. When the coalition fleets arrived, they expected to crush savages. Instead, they met soldiers. Elias commanded the Zerath with precision. He split the enemy lines, used traps in asteroid fields, and turned their own weapons against them. Kayla led the warriors on the front lines, her spear striking fear into every heart that saw her. What should have been a massacre turned into a slaughter, just not of the Zerath. The coalition fleets were torn apart. Their generals fell one by one. Entire planets surrendered rather than face Elias and his warriors. When the smoke cleared, the galaxy realized a terrifying truth. The Zerath had not only survived, they had become stronger. And at the center of it all stood Elias Cain, no longer a prisoner. No longer just a man, but a legend. The tribes who once mocked him now knelt before him. The warriors who once hated him now carried his banner. And Kayla, once his fiercest enemy, now stood at his side. Not as a rival, but as his partner, his wife, his equal in conquest. The story spread across the stars. In every corner of the galaxy, whispers carried the tale. Everyone feared the Zerath. But now they fear the man who leads them. High Warlord Zerath, once ready to kill Elias, now stood beside him. The old warlord had seen many warriors rise and fall, but never one like this. You are not Zerath by blood, Zerath said, his voice low, almost respectful, but you are Zerath by spirit, perhaps more than any of us. Elias nodded, but his eyes burned with something greater. We will not stop with survival. We will not stop with fear. We will build something larger, a power no empire will ever dare challenge again. Zerath smiled grimly. Then the galaxy will remember your name forever. And so it began. From the ashes of endless wars, a new force rose. Not just the Zirath and not just humanity, but a union of both, fierce strength fused with cunning strategy, brutality tempered by vision. Elias Cain and Kayla, warrior and warlord's daughter, became symbols of this new age. Together they led armies across the stars not as conquerors without purpose, but as rulers with destiny. The galaxy trembled because they understood the truth. Fear alone could be defeated. But fear mixed with respect, loyalty, and love, that was unstoppable. The legend of Elias Cain spread far beyond battlefields. Some said he was a madman who dared to stand where no one else would. Others said he was chosen by fate itself. But every story ended the same way. One man against impossible odds had done what no empire, no army, no weapon could do. He had conquered the unconquerable. He had married the fiercest of the Zirath. And together, they built an empire that changed the galaxy forever. From then on, when the stars whispered the name of the Zirath, they no longer spoke of monsters alone. They spoke of the man who had tamed them, Elias Cain, the human warlord. The conqueror who became a legend.